Hi girls and boys, it's story time again, and you know I'm always very happy to read stories because I have lots of favourite books. But this story time is my very last one that I'm going to be reading for you, so I'm very sad about that because I would love to be able to read to you sitting on my rug this story, and I can't. I have to read you the story on my computer. So that makes me sad, but I hope you're going to enjoy the book. I've got my special school t-shirt on, see? Celebrate you guys being in the fours class and graduating, because our letter of the week is G, isn't it? G for graduation, and this will be your very last day of school, our school teaching, and it makes me sad that I won't see you and be able to give you a hug and wave goodbye to you as you go off for the summer and then to big school. Maybe I'll see you when you pick up your little brothers or sisters from the school. I would love to be able to see you, or maybe you could just come back and see me and Mrs. Garcia, because I know that Mrs. Garcia would love to see you too. Anyway, let's get on with the book. Now, this book has somebody in it that begins with a G, G and J. It says the G, right? So this is George. George is in my book, and he is a giant. And this book is called The Spiffiest Giant in Town. Now, spiffiest is a word that you use in England sometimes, and it means smart and fashionable and elegant and really looking good. If you're spiffy, you're looking good. So let's see what happens with George the giant. George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same pair of old brown sandals and the same old patched up gown. "I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town," he said sadly. He does look a bit sad, doesn't he? But he's definitely a giant, for sure. Okay, let's have a look. Let's see what happens. But one day, George noticed a new shop. It was full of spiffy clothes, so he bought a spiffy shirt, a spiffy pair of pants, a spiffy belt, a spiffy striped tie, some spiffy socks with diamonds on the sides, a pair of spiffy shiny shoes. "Now I'm the spiffiest giant in town," he said proudly. I wonder what he's going to look like. Let's see. There he is. He does look very spiffy and smart, doesn't he? George left his old clothes behind the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the sidewalk stood a giraffe who was sniffing sadly. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my neck," said the giraffe. "It's so very long and so very cold. I wish I had a long, warm scarf." Oh, George, he does look sad, doesn't he, that the giraffe is sad. "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his striped tie. "It didn't match my socks anyway," he said, as he wound it round and around the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. "Thank you," said the giraffe. That was very kind of him, wasn't it? As George strode home, he sang to himself. "My tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." He still looks very spiffy in his smart shirt and pants and shoes. George came to the river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating loudly. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sail," said the goat. "It blew away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat," said the goat. Oh dear, you won't be able to go very far without a sail, will it? "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his new white shirt. "It kept coming untucked anyway," he said, as he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. "Thank you," said the goat. George strode on, singing to himself. My tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on the boat as a sail for a goat, but look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town. There he is. He hasn't got many of his clothes left, has he, though? He's been very kind. George came to a tiny ruined house. Beside the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's our house," squeaked the mother mouse. "It's burnt down and now we have nowhere to live. I wish we had a nice new house." Oh boy. Poor mouse. What do you think George is going to do? "Cheer up," said George, and he took off one of his shiny shoes. "It was giving me blisters anyway," he said, as the mouse and her babies scrambled inside. The shoe was a perfect home for them. "Thank you," they squeaked. Can you see them? George had to hop along the road now, but he didn't mind. As he hopped, he sang to himself. "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on the boat as a sail for a goat, my shoe is a house for a little white mouse, but look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." I think he's starting to look a bit funny. George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's my sleeping bag," said the fox. "I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag." Oh dear, he didn't tie it onto his backpack very well, did he, that silly fox? I wonder what George is going to give the fox. "Cheer up," said George, as he took off one of his socks with the diamonds on the sides. "It was tickling my toes anyway," he said. As the fox snuggled into it, it made a very fine sleeping bag. "Thank you," said the fox. George hopped on, singing to himself. "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, my shoe is a house for a little white mouse, one of my socks is a bed for a fox, but look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." He's a very happy giant, isn't he? I wonder what's going to happen next. George came to a big squishy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. "What's the matter?" asked George. "It's the bog," said the dog. "I need to get across it, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe drive path." It does look very sticky. It does need to be a safe path, doesn't there? I wonder what George is going to do. Let's see what happens. A page. There we go. What did he take off? "Cheer up," said George as he took off his spiffy new belt. "It was squeezing my tummy anyway," he said, as he laid it down over the bog. It was an excellent path. It made an excellent path. "Thank you," said the dog. The wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He hopped on, singing to himself. "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, my shoe is a house for a small little white mouse, one of my socks is a bed for a fox, my belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog." But what is happening to George? "My pants are falling down. I'm the coldest giant in town." Uh-oh. Suddenly George felt sad and shivery and not at all spiffy. He stood on one foot and thought, "I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some more clothes," he decided. He turned around and hopped all the way back to the shop. Oh my goodness, poor George. He was so kind, giving all of his things away, and now he has really nothing left. Let's see. I don't know if I've turned the right page. It's got stuck. There we go. But when he got there, the shop was closed. Oh no. Oh no, cried George as he sank down on the sidewalk. With a tear ran down his nose. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met on his way home. Then out of the corner of his eye he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. George took a closer look. Can you see? "My gown!" he yelled. "My dear old gown and sandals." George put them on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. "I'm the coziest giant in town," he cried, and he danced back home along the road. Now, wasn't George so kind? Wasn't he kind? Let's see what happens. Outside his front door stood all the animals he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. "Come on, George," they said. "Open it." George untied the ribbon, and inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. "Look inside the card, George," said the animals. George put the crown on his head and opened the card. Inside it said, "You gave your scarf to a cold giraffe, your shirt's on the boat as a sail for a goat, your shoe is a house for a little white mouse, one of your socks is a bed for a fox, your belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog, so here is a very fine crown to go with the sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town." Now, wasn't that nice? George was so kind to all of those animals that needed his help. He gave his spiffy clothes away, and then they made him a lovely crown to say thank you. So I know you boys and girls, you're all so kind and so helpful. You would be the spiffiest children in town, wouldn't you? So that's my last story for you girls and boys. I'm so sad that it's my very last one, but I'm so happy to have taught you all through the year. And I'm sure I'm going to see some of you again. I hope I do, because I'm going to miss you. I'm so proud of you. Do wonderfully well in kindergarten, and I hope I'm going to see you again soon. Bye, everybody.